is up, YouTube? Good evening. Today I bring you my, I'm not even sure what to call this, my hybrid stamina Templar build. I'm going to call it the Wretched Hybrid. It is started as a basic stamina Templar PvP build, but it is very hybrid-esque, uses a lot of magic skills, and as you can see, it is very, very hybridized because it just seems to work quite well. I like the combination of dual wield front bar and resto back bar, and due to the changes that the ZeniMax has made, that is a viable option because you don't really lose anything, since every skill, with one notable exception that we actually use on this build, every skill scales with either the higher, whatever is highest, be it magicka, stamina, or spell damage, weapon damage, etc., etc. But we'll get into all that in a moment. This build is good in Cyrodiil, Battlegrounds, and Imperial City. I actually don't change anything. It is quite tanky. It has good damage. It has very good sustain. It is good in 1vx, although it's probably not the greatest 1vx build in the world. Due to lack of crowd control, I would say, is one of the main issues. But in a group, a small group, 2, 3, 4 people, it is very has a lot of group utility, very helpful in a group. And it is also a bit customizable. There's a couple different ways you can run it if you want a little bit more damage or a little bit more tankiness, and I'll go over those options as we go through it. So what is the build? It is a Imperial Templar. Why Imperial? Well, Imperial is one of, I think, the two best hybrid races, the other being Dark Elf. Imperial gives you max health, max stamina, and the hybrid portion reduces the cost of all your abilities. This includes magic, stamina, ultimate, and core combat, such as blocking, break free, sprinting, roll dodge, etc. So a lot of good resource management in both magic and stamina abilities, for both magic and stamina abilities, and then the health and the stamina, because it is still more or less, I want it to be a stamina Templar because I wanted to have medium armor, fast, a lot of roll dodging. I didn't want to be a light armor magicka focused build, but I wound up using a lot of magic skills, and it's hybridized, but I wanted the stamina play style, using some stamina skills, and then the mobility and in higher armor, the medium armor benefits. I wanted to go that route rather than the light armor option. So that's why I consider it more of a stamina build. If you wanted to be a Dark Elf, that would be fine. The sustain would be a lot different though. I haven't tried Dark Elf, but you do get weapon and spell damage, which is kind of, that doesn't really benefit you because you're really only going to take advantage of one of them. And then it gives you the stamina and the magic, 2,000 of each, and then the fire resistance and no additional health. So I think Imperial is better overall. But if you were a Dark Elf, it would probably work okay. High Elf might be all right as well. As a Templar, we are going into spell damage. Any Templar, either magic or stamina, should go into spell damage and not weapon damage, because you can achieve a higher spell damage on a Templar than you can weapon damage due to the minor sorcery buff. So whatever you're doing, a spell damage race would be better than a weapon damage race, and having both on a Dark Elf is kind of a waste. What I'm talking about, hopefully everyone understands this by now, but Templar gets this right here, minor sorcery, 10%. So every skill can scale with weapon or spell damage, but Templar simply cannot get as high weapon damage as it can spell damage, unless you're in a group or something and your friend is buffing you. But generally speaking, by yourself, you cannot get as high weapon damage on a Templar as you can spell damage. So whatever you do, you should be using spell damage as your primary stat, since every skill now goes off of it, scales off of it, except for one exception that I'm aware of that I'll explain in a little while. So you do get, that's one of the things to remember. As far as race, we are not a vampire. I just don't find it necessary. It would make resource sustain more challenging. You would get tankiness from Undeath passive. I think we're tanky enough. It would be nice to have mist form. We don't have it. That's okay. You could be a vampire if you want. I don't like the way vampires look. I'm tired of being a vampire and every character. Vampire, boring, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to make a non-vampire. It seems like I don't need the vampirism, so I'm not using it. As far as food, Bewitched Sugar Skulls gives you, might as well show you, I guess. health, stamina, and basically tri-stat food with additional health recovery. In PvP, the health recovery is sort of irrelevant. It's cut in half. It's something. I'm not a vampire, so I get some benefit out of it. But if you don't have Bewitched Sugar Skulls and you have a cheaper, I believe it's purple, the Crown Tri-Food, or any other tri-stat food that you craft, it's not going to be a big difference. Bewitched Sugar Skulls is really not that expensive, though. It's pretty easy to make, pretty easy to buy, so I'd probably just go with that just for the additional. You get a couple hundred more stamina, magic, and health, and then a 462 health recovery that the regular tri-stat food does not provide. It's not a big difference, so if you don't have this, it's okay, but it's not that hard to get, so I would probably just go ahead and get it. Potions, I don't have any right now. I actually use these cheap potions quite a bit on this build, and it works out okay. You can use Alliance. You don't need it for the boss, but you can use Alliance spell power, Alliance, what is it called? Spell Drought, or the classic PvE spell power potions. The skills on the build are already giving you Major Prophecy and Major Sorcery, which we'll get into, but you don't need the expensive food. It just lasts longer though, so I do use Alliance Spell Droughts when I have them, just because they last 45 seconds rather than, as you can see here, 28 seconds. But you can use Trash Magicka Pots, and it's not that big a difference. Or ideally, just use Tri-Stat Potions. I just happen to have run out of them. I need to make some more or buy some more. But Tri-Stat Potions are probably your best option. If you don't have that, use whatever. You can kind of use whatever potion you prefer, because all your buffs are covered with the skills. Immovable potions, detect potions, whatever you have, whatever you prefer. Doesn't matter that much. Mundus Stone, we are interestingly going with the Atronach. I've tried, you could use, this is not mandatory, the Sustain, we use a lot of magic skills, so I'm using the Atronach, which is sort of weird on a Stamina Templar. If you feel that your magic, we use Restoring Focus, the stamina morph of Channeled Focus. So we have our stamina recovery kind of covered there. And then we have cost reduction from being an Imperial. So I go with the Atronach to help on the magic side. You could flip it around and perhaps use Channeled Focus with the Serpent Mundus Stone, or just go with the Apprentice for extra spell damage, or even the Lover. I've wound up here because I like being able to just spam abilities non-stop. So I like the Magic Sustain, especially for healing. Our healing abilities are pretty much, if I recall, all magic, so that's why I go with this, so we don't die. But you could, if you feel you don't need it, use something else. And that's pretty much it. So let us get into the gear. This is, as I mentioned, I think, if not, dual wield resto, okay? Front bar, back bar. Dual wield gives you 2 traits, the most damage. We're trying to stack spell damage, as I mentioned. And then you could go sword and shield. I have been liking resto lately for the skills and the ability to heavy attack for major mending, and to restore magicka, and to use the resto ulti, which is not required but is an option. You could do sword and shield, but you may struggle a little bit without having any, I like having the ranged poke to proc the poison that we're using and to heavy attack and such. So I find this a more enjoyable playstyle than dual wield sword and shield, but do that if you prefer. And you could even use two-handed on the front bar, but I do like the dual wield with the double traits. And just I've been liking dual wield lately a little bit more than two-handed on a lot of the builds. So gear, front bar, I went with Titanborn. It gives you just on the front bar with the dual wield. What does Titanborn do? It gives you offensive stats, baseline penetration, spell damage, stamina Templar, and then it gives you additional weapon damage and penetration on the 5-piece, which increases in benefit the less health you have. So as your health decreases, you gain penetration and you gain weapon and or spell damage is really what we care about. So I found this to be very nice, killing people when you're in dire straits and then healing back to full. You could use something like War Maiden would be another option, which I've used. So that I think those are probably my 2 favorite choices for the front bar. Plague Break might be something else to consider, but I've been using that on a lot of builds and I'm kind of bored of it. And in a one-on-one fight, Plague Break is not so great. So I did go with the mace and sword. You could use dual maces for more penetration. Our penetration is not that great. So there's that, 7,600, and we really don't go up. So use whatever you have. the sword gives you the spell damage and the mace gives you the penetration. I think 2 maces might be better, but I went with Nerd Honed on one for extra damage and Sharpened on the other for more penetration. The glyphs are also customizable. This just gives me more stamina return since I'm a stamina Templar and can proc the, the Sundered status, Minor Breach. So I correct myself. The penetration can go up to about 10-5 when that procs, but it procs occasionally. It's not a super high uptime. And then I went with Shock for minor vulnerability, but use whatever glyphs you prefer. You could go Disease, Flame, I don't know, whatever you like. I do use a poison on the back bar. Escapist Poison just basically gives you an Immobilize, which the build does not have anywhere else, and then makes you unstoppable, so you cannot be you cannot be stunned or immobilized for 4.4 seconds. You could use a Berserk Glyph as option number 2, I think, on the back bar to get even more spell damage. And then, so we're running the 2 maces, and then, the pieces we're running. Wretched Vitality is crafted, so you can run. Oh, I gave it away. The back bar is Wretched Vitality, Wretched Hybrid, So the back bar, Wretched Vitality. This gives us a lot of sustain. This is where our sustain comes from. Magic recovery, stamina recovery, additional damage, spell damage. And then when you proc a major buff or debuff, you get 260 magic and stamina recovery. And when you proc a minor debuff or buff, you get 130 magic and stamina recovery. So it covers sustain for both resources. This means you can buff yourself or debuff an enemy to proc these things. But how do we do it mainly? One skill gives us both. We're not in combat, so it's not going to work. But if you cast this is Restoring Focus. You get Major Resolve and Minor Mending. So both aspects of Wretched Vitality are procced immediately. You can proc it in other ways throughout the fight. Some of the other skills will do it as well. But as long as if you start a fight, Light Attack, Restoring Focus, boom, your Wretched Vitality is activated. I'll show it later. There's no one to fight here. So anyway, but it's easy to proc, easy to keep it up. Not a big deal. You're going to cast that skill anyway. So that's our back bar. And then the third set is Bloodspawn. You could do Magma here. I did use Magma quite a bit. It will increase your damage as well as group utility. But I found I like the ultimate generation. With this, you can kind of spam our ultimate, or using Surprise, we're using Crescent Sweep, which is very cheap. It'll be up quite a bit using Bloodspawn. It gives you the tankiness, it gives you the stamina recovery, since we are, as I mentioned, a stamina hybrid, whatever you want to call it, Templar, for the Wretched hybrid build. But Magma is totally fine as well. If you feel in a group, you have a healer, you don't need the tankiness of Bloodspawn, swap it out. I've done it. I don't have it on me, but I did play with Magma quite a bit. It synergizes very well with Templar, boosting that spell damage even higher. So how do I... And then the two other things, one trainee. You can use... you can make a Wretched ring and use a heavy trainee chest, whatever you have. Because one set is crafted, you have a lot of flexibility as to what pieces you put where. It doesn't really matter. We are running, if I recall, 3-3-1. So we have, 3 heavy, 3 heavy, 3 medium, because as I said, I wanted the benefits of the sprinting and the increased spell damage from medium armor, and just 1 light just for that recovery. And I'll go over those passives after. So 3-3-1 setup with 1 reinforced. I think I'm doing... What am I doing? I don't even remember. I always go heavy reinforced chest. That seems to be the meta right now. I have 1 well fitted, 3 well fitted, and 3 impen, I guess. Yeah. I don't know that the traits really even matter that much. Go more impen if you feel you need more burst protection. Go more well fitted if you roll dodge. You could go all well fitted with 1 reinforced. I don't know that it's that big a deal. The sustain on this build is really, really good, so you may not really need 3 well fitted. You could perhaps go with a few more impen pieces. Depends what you feel, or even put another reinforced on a heavy piece. I've tried that out recently, and that seems to be nice, more armor. So for now, 1 reinforced, 3 impen, 3 well fitted. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. Yes, okay. I think I went that way more or less because my blood spawn was already in these traits. But definitely, obviously, use heavy on the big pieces, head, chest, and legs. The waist should be light if possible, and then the rest medium. And then the final piece after the 1 trainee, just for more health, is the Mark and Ring of Majesty. Of course, like everybody in the world uses, additional spell damage and additional armor. Death Dealer would be option number 2. I've been using that a little bit more on some, especially in Cyrodiil where you have time. It's kind of up all the time because you're constantly in combat in Cyrodiil. Thankfully, there's a bug, so you can never leave combat. So your Death Dealer's Fet Ring, which I do have right here, it gives you about 3,000 to every stat when it's fully procced. But so that's option 2. Play around. I like this though for the defense and the additional spell damage because, as I mentioned, we're trying to stack spell damage with the minor sorcery and the major sorcery. That 200 becomes what does it become? Like 250, more like. And then the jewelry is all infused, all spell damage. We don't need any sustain here. As I said, we're wearing a sustain set, and then all. I thought I had all tri-stats, but I do have 1 magic piece, I guess, left over. So as many tri-stats as you can get, I think, would be, again, you're hybrid, you're using both pools. Try to do as many tri-stats as you can. Oh, I didn't mention powered on the back bar, just to increase our healing. Things like Honor the Dead and the skills I'll go over in a second. And then I mentioned already Nirnhone and Sharpen. So that's it, I think. I went over options. Let's go into the skills. So this is the first setup. This is the super tanky setup where I'm using Lingering Flare on both bars, which gives you basically 10% damage reduction at all times with major protection. So if we look at our back bar, we have major and minor protection up at all times because we are using Temporal Guard on this particular setup. This is the maximum tanky setup. Okay, so our resistances will be, we're not using a defending staff or anything, so our resistances are not like insane, but they're decent, and we have 10% damage mitigation plus 5% from minor protection, major and minor protection on the back bar, so that's not shown on the stat sheet here. Okay, so that's sort of skill layout 1 if you want a super tankiness. This is a flex spot as well. We're wearing it now just for passive 5% damage reduction. The other option would be, of course, which I haven't even, Resto Ultimate, Life Giver would be the morph to go with, and then level up these 3 things. Very strong, cheap healing ultimate, so use whatever you prefer. But if you want baseline tankiness on the back bar, just keep Temporal Guard. So Temporal Guard or Life Giver. Going back to just the skills in general, one thing I did not mention, stat-wise, if you're an Imperial using Bewitched, I put 14 points in Magicka because I wanted, around 21,000. I wanted at least 30,000 health, so we wound up with 32,000 and 40 in stamina. This seems to work very nicely. I never feel like I'm out of anything with potions and such. So obviously customizable, but as a hybrid, we're using a lot of magic skills, as I'll get into. I think 6 magic skills. So you need a decent 15,000 magic is probably not going to cut it. So I had to put a little bit of points in here, a few points. As you can see, we have one. Well, anyway. So Lingering Flare. If you want more damage, setup. Well, let's go through this whole setup and then I'll go over the options. I went with the stamina morph here, just because I wanted to not have to slot anything to get major sorcery. So this gives you major sorcery for 10 seconds, and you don't have to slot entropy or rally or whatever. And I didn't want to use. I wanted to use dual wield, so I didn't want to use rally, and I didn't want to use entropy. Entropy's okay, but it's like played out. I'm sick of it, and it's not that great a dot, and you have to put it on each individual, blah, blah, blah. So I just go with this, and it's our magic, so that's our stamina skill. This is here primarily as a passive ability. The Fighters Guild passives, if you don't know, go ask somebody. No, but I'll tell you. Increases 3%, so we get 3% more weapon damage. I'm sorry, 3% more spell damage. And then it gives me major prophecy. I think our crits are identical. So we get both, 24% on the front bar. It gives us the prophecy for both the magic and the stamina. And really what it's for is also the berserk. So minor berserk, which is 5% additional. It doesn't even say. It's actually 5%, as far as I know, additional damage when you do critical damage from the flank. So that's why that's there. It's obviously a flex spot. You know, you could put an execute here if you wanted to. Radiant Glory, whatever. You could keep this and then add the other skill, you know, something else. But so it's kind of a flex spot, but a lot of passive benefits. We go with Purifying Light. So this is the only skill I think in the game that I can think of off the top of my head. The two more so this that do not scale with both weapon and spell damage. And it even says it right here. It scales right there, the maximum copy damage, based only on your spell damage. The other morph scales off weapon damage. So you have to make a choice. Do you want to use Power of the Light, which would give you minor breach, but not the healing, and cost stamina. This costs magic, pretty cheap, scales off your spell damage, and gives you a nice, pretty strong heal there, as you can see. And you can put it on multiple targets and have that heal coming in from different people. So I felt that the other one would hit less hard because it would our weapon damage is lower. Slightly less damage if I use Power of the Light, but it would give me the more penetration. But as I mentioned, I'm already using this glyph here to try and proc minor minor breach from any physical damage has a chance to proc the Sundered status effect, which can proc minor breach. Tell me if that's not correct, but that's how I understand it. So I don't really need Power of the Light, and I want the burst when it goes off after 6 seconds, the maximum copy damage, which that number does go up, obviously. I wanted to make that as high as possible, so I went without the penetration because I'm theoretically getting it from somewhere else, and I chose the one that costs magic and scales off spell damage since our spell damage is higher. But if you wanted more penetration, use the other morph. Long-winded explanation, but that's it. That's the rationale. You have to make a choice, choose one or the other. It's the one skill that I can think of that doesn't scale off both resources, unlike every other skill on my bar here. I do like the gap closer on the Templar, so we go with Toppling Charge. It deals damage, it stuns, sets off balance. If they block it, you can heavy attack to stun them and knock them down because they will be off balance. That happens pretty often. Sometimes catches people by surprise. You could use Javelin if you prefer. I would switch to Aurora Javelin though, which I don't have. But I do like the gap closer to keep people in range of jabs. I find it harder to play without it, so that's why I go with this. Ultimate, use whatever you want, but as I mentioned, it's very cheap, it hits very hard, it has a dot, it procs the Burning Light passive right here for an additional 5200 damage, and that'll go up when you're buffed. So I think this is superior. You could use Dawnbreaker. I hate Dawnbreaker personally. It just misses all the time. That cast time is terribly annoying. And at least with this, if they move to the side, you still hit them because it's a 360 degree attack that hits things to the side and behind you if you're not perfectly in front for a little bit less damage, but still at least you hit them. And it's about half the price of Dawnbreaker, so I prefer this generally speaking. Back bar, as I mentioned, Temporal Guard or Resto Ulti, Lingering Flare on the back bar. I should mention you can use Lingering Flare or even Camel Hunter to take people out of stealth, although Jabs also takes people out of stealth, as does Crescent Sweep. So you have several options. I don't really ever cast this, but it's there. I go with Radiating Regeneration. Look at that heal. It's not even, it gets even higher. This is just with Major Sorcery without Minor Sorcery. Right? Seems like it should be higher, but anyway. I go with this morph because it's guaranteed to hit you. You could use Radiating Regeneration. It doesn't last as long, but it's more bursty. The heal is condensed over a shorter period of time. But this one is more guaranteed. You run the risk of Radiating Regeneration. I'm sorry, Rapid Regeneration. The other morph, if you use that, it sometimes will not hit you. It'll hit your ally and not you. So that can be annoying, and that's why I go with this, a longer, more reliable heal as opposed to a stronger, burstier heal. This also provides group utility because you can heal up to 3 individuals, so it's nice to heal your friends. Honor the Dead, burst heal, not much to say about it, very strong. Can heal your allies as well, costs magic. And let's look at the tooltip. It goes even higher because I do not have Minor Sorcery. It would be nice to have Minor Sorcery proc, but there's nobody here. To proc Minor Sorcery on this build, all you need to do is cast Purifying Light, which needs an opponent. So we'll do that in a minute. But to give you some idea of the tooltip, you're going to be looking at like a 14,000 tooltip. Extended Ritual, this is our cleanse, provides a heal, a synergy, heals your allies, gets rid of 5 negative effects. It's just good. If you don't want to use it because you're afraid of proccing Plague Break, that's fine. Flex it out for something else. This skill, I would say, is mandatory. As I mentioned, I went with the Stamina Morph because I want to be able to run, roll dodge, block, sprint, etc. And we use the Atronach Mundus for a mag recovery. This provides an additional, essentially, almost about 484 stamina recovery that does not show up on the tooltip, on the character sheet. So if you go here, you know, your stamina recovery is really about 500 more than that number there. So it's 1360 or something like that. So just bear that in mind, which is fine. You don't really, you can heavy attack for stamina, heavy attack for magicka, and then this provides also your armor buff, obviously, Major Resolve. And then because of passives, as I mentioned, it heals you. Or it does not heal you, I'm sorry. It gives you increased block mitigation. We're not really blocking that much. It gives you the Minor Mending, which procs Wretched Vitality. And then it does heal you, as I mentioned. It gives you 2300 every second. So you're going to layer your hots. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to keep, and you got 3 strong heals over time. You're going to be hard to kill. And then you have a burst heal as needed. But so as long as these are down, then you can go on the offensive, and you're tanky with the major protection on both bars. So that's kind of setup number 1. And as you can see, we only have 1 stamina skill, right? So it's sort of odd. We don't really cast this. We have 1 stamina skill, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm sorry. 5 magic skills and 2 stamina skills. I'm getting confused. 2 stamina skills and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 magic skills. So that's why I consider this kind of a hybrid, I guess. But call it whatever you want. The reason I switched to Resto rather than a standard stamina with a sword and shield is, again, for the group utility and the range capabilities and the heavy attacks. And if you don't know some of the benefits of a heavy attack Resto, you get major mending. You already have minor mending from your Templar passive, so you get major and minor mending, so your healing is strong, and you have a powered Resto staff for 8% more. You get this, increases your healing. This is what I'm talking about here. You get a lot of magic back when you heavy attack, in addition to healing your ally and getting major mending, and then this is kind of whatever, and then you get more healing. So that's why we went Resto. So what are the other options? Just really one other setup I run. You could switch to Magma Incarnate for more damage, and then what you can do also is, I like to do this, put Blood Craze there, and then if you need more ability, like in a Battleground, like a flag game, or just whatever reason you need. I don't use a snare removal, as you may have noticed. If you think you need one, I just do this. This is my other setup. Less tanky, but you're faster, and you have this additional damage over time ability, which can help you take down tankier targets, and it provides a heal for you as well. Decent heal. So I use that. That's my setup number 2. And then you can do this. So that's another skill layout that you can go with. And those are the 2 main setups I use, or 2 or 3 main setups. And then the only other thing, as I mentioned, is swapping out Bloodspawn for Magma Incarnate. I think I went over kind of all the key passives. You should obviously have all of them, but the ones that are particularly relevant: the Burning Light, the crit passive Piercing Spear, the Illuminate for the minor sorcery, the Sacred Ground giving you the minor mending, which procs your Wretched Vitality, the Dual Wield. These are all, you don't need every single one because you're not using any dual wield skills really, but you should just get them all basically. Light, medium, and heavy, and this is what I was talking about. I want to be able to have reduced sprint cost, sneak, block, the area of effect, the movement speed. That's why I want it to be three-piece medium as opposed to light. You miss out on the penetration, but I don't care. And then 3 heavy gives me, this more health. Heavy attacks, as I mentioned, this gives me more heavy attack, more resource return from heavy attacking, and again, increased healing by wearing the 3 heavy pieces. You do have the penalties, what increased magic attacks and whatever, I don't know. So you have those negatives as well, but I just prefer, I wanted to do a more less light armor and be tankier. And then finally, champion points. This one, you know, whatever, Rationer, Sea's Blessing, gifted, use liquid efficiency if you want, doesn't matter. Here I have a pretty standard setup. What am I trying to show you here? Okay. Master at Arms, Biting Aura, you know, direct damage, AoE damage, this is for our jabs, and our Crest and Sweep, both of these, and then the two defensive ones that everyone pretty much takes to reduce direct damage and reduce single target damage. And then here, I went with Celerity for movement speed, Survival Instinct for even more cost reduction of our core combat abilities. Because we're a hybrid build, I want to make sure we have as much recoveries as possible. So this gives us all 3 stat recoveries. Again, the health recovery is kind of whatever, but the magic and stamina are important. And then more health. I did want to work in this, but I tried back and forth, Fortified, Sustain by Suffering. You know, it's not set in stone. You can kind of use whatever you think is better. This gives you a little additional tankiness. It's not a huge amount. So I've gone with this mostly. I've decided to switch, and I found this better. We already have major protection, so you don't need that. I was playing around with that at one point before I settled on using Lingering Flare most of the time. If you decide not to use Lingering Flare and you go with the Blood Craze and the Race Against Time, you could consider putting Relentlessness on to get that major protection back, at least some of the time. So here I'll just show you a little bit of the stats. So here our base spell damage on the front bar, almost 4,900, and we proc minor sorcery and major sorcery, and we go up to 6,156. With Battle Spirit in Cyrodiil, that would be about 6,500. So that's pretty much how high you'll get, 6,500 spell damage. And then to proc Wretched Vitality, you'll see right here we have both. Just by casting Restoring Focus, we proc both aspects of that set. There it is, 1 and 2. So easy to proc, easy to maintain, simple. It's not a very complex, you know, rotation or anything you're doing, so that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you think hybrids suck, let me know. Happy to discuss, answer questions, etc. Thanks for watching. Peace.